Have you ever seen these photographs of young women armed with assault rifles, posing nonchalantly in front of the lens? You might think it was an artistic production or a sequence from an old movie. The reality will surprise you. The lovely women you see with their white hands are gun makers, and they were employed at John Inglis' Canadian factory. These images are from 1944. The weapons that these young workers were making were to be shipped to soldiers of the Allied countries in World War II. Created by John Inglis, this factory was one of the main houses that supplied the contingents of enlisted soldiers, and the workforce was made up of young women. This company has since evolved into the manufacture of household appliances under the name of Whirlpool, which we all know today. What a story behind the photograph, isn't it? In fact, would you like to discover other historical photographs which are full of mystery and which reveal even more incredible stories? Then stay with us until the end. The Mysterious Hand. This historic photograph from 1900 raises some questions that have not been answered. Examine the image carefully. At first sight, nothing extraordinary. It is about 15 workers whose arms are crossed in front of a textile factory in Ireland. Consider the details. Do you see anything odd? The young woman at the far right, sitting in the second row from the bottom, do you notice anything on her right shoulder? It's a hand, but who does it belong to? All the women around her have their arms crossed, and there is no one to her left. What do you think could be the explanation for this strange detail? The Alligator Park. In a few decades, the world has changed. What is now outrageous, unimaginable, was common and even amusing last century. To illustrate this profound change, there is this old picture where we see a happy child riding an alligator in 1920 in Florida, USA. You wouldn't believe it, but it was an attractive and popular form of entertainment at the beginning of the last century. In 1907, entrepreneurs had built a vast park and they placed thousands of reptiles there, rented to the film industry. With the help of loud advertisements, the Alligator Park became known throughout the state. Families flocked to the park and children played freely with alligators of various sizes. It's hard to believe, but the only rules of caution visitors had to follow were to avoid throwing rocks at the crocodiles or spitting at them. But generally, contact with these dangerous reptiles was so free, so unsupervised, that there were even pranksters who stole a few. It was allowed to enjoy a snack on the edge of a pond, on a table set up for the occasion, in the middle of alligators. You could let your baby play in a cage filled with little alligators. You could even swim with them. It was a different time. A neurologist and his patient. This mysterious image summarizes the history of a scientist's research and innovations. It shows two characters. The seated man is a patient suffering from easy paralysis. Behind him stands the famous French neurologist Duchenne de Boulogne. He is holding an instrument whose tip touches the patient's forehead. But what do you think he is doing? Here's the answer. This doctor is known to have conducted research on the application of alternating current to human muscles. By means of localized electrical discharges, he precisely isolates muscle groups and observes their functions. This process allowed him to locate the origin of various cases of muscular affections and to make other discoveries. Moreover, he took the understanding of facial expressions a step further by highlighting the play of facial muscles. He established, for example, that sincere smiles activates not only the muscle of the mouth but also those of the eyes. This illustration we have seen perpetuates in some way the reputation of this doctor, known for having used electricity on the human body all his life. The oldest photograph of a man that exists. This black and white photograph is simply the oldest one ever made where we can see a human being. Although of poor quality due to the deterioration of time, it shows a corner of the Boulevard du Temple in Paris. This daguerreotype photograph was taken in 1838 by the inventor of the technique himself, Louis Daguerre. He knew that this process was something quite new, and it was not as you might imagine. It took a quarter of an hour to make this shot. During this time, the street was busy, with people coming and going. But by misfortune, the image only kept the simple presence of a passerby who is having his boots shined. Little did they know that they would be seen by the whole world throughout the centuries. This picture caused a sensation. In 1839, this image made the front page of the New York Times, and the journalists expressed their amazement at the extraordinary detail it contained. They could not believe it. The sanatorium in the woods. When you see this old photograph, you think you are looking at a discreet and rural house where a small family leads a quiet and pleasant life in the shade of tall trees and abundant vegetation. But the reality is less jovial. It is actually a cottage built in 1885 to treat tuberculosis patients. The small building and many others are located in a village called Saranac Lake in New York. The woman dressed in white is a nurse. These cure houses were designed by the physician Edward Trudeau, who felt that large confined spaces were not conducive to recovery. These houses, on the other hand, are located in the countryside, in peaceful places where the air is pure, in order to promote the healing of patients. Despite this, several hundred patients lost their lives. The artist who reconstitutes the face of the dead. In this photo, we see a smiling woman kneading a human head made of clay behind a mannequin. It's not quite for an art show, as you'll learn. In fact, the task she is doing has a slightly creepy meaning. To help you understand her work, we must first talk about a particularly barbaric American serial killer, John Wayne Gacy. He was active in the United States in the 1970s. He is very well known and has made more than 30 victims. These victims, it is partly thanks to Betty Pat Gatliff, a forensic artist, that they could be identified. This is the woman you see in the photo, and she is modeling facial features of a John Wayne Gacy victim. Her work has been invaluable in locating many of the missing and forgotten victims. As one local newspaper put it, she has made a living reanimating the dead. The Russian imperial family. Perhaps you recognize this family photo? It is the Russian imperial family of the Romanovs in their finest finery. This portrait, where we see all the members of the family, took place a few months before all of them, without exception, were brutally murdered in the same house in 1918 by Bolshevik militants. The servants did not escape the massacre of that terrible night. In July 1918, the Romanov family was taken under false pretenses to a room where they were executed by a dozen armed men. Their bodies were transported discreetly during the night to a place where they were made to disappear forever. The explosion of the Challenger shuttle. Can you guess what this bizarre illustration represents? You may have a vague idea. It is a mushroom cloud due to an explosion in the sky. But what exploded? It is the American space shuttle Challenger, which simply disintegrated a few seconds after takeoff, killing all the crew on the spot. This astronautical disaster, which occurred in 1986, is due to two main factors. First of all, the defective design of some parts of the shuttle, and then the bad weather conditions of this winter morning. There were 7 people on board, among them a young teacher, a civilian, invited to take part in this project. Nobody survived. The tragedy shook the country and aroused for some time controversial debates on the safety of innovative technologies. An abandoned room in Chernobyl. Here is a sadly symbolic photo. A doll's head on a demolished sofa in the middle of a ravaged room. This is not a war damage, but the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. This room may have been a family room or a play area. In any case, only dust ruins remain. How many children were victims of the nuclear disaster? It is difficult to know, but according to a recent study by the engineer Yves Lenoir, president of the Association Children of Chernobyl, Belarus, infant mortality has increased in the neighboring countries. Thus, there would be a surplus of at least 62,730 deaths of children before the age of 1 year between 1986 and 2012. Unit 731. Among the most striking old images found are these from the 1930s showing armed soldiers threatening prisoners and doctors in white coats busy in front of a table full of instruments. These images come from Japan, evoking one of the most barbaric historical episodes of the last century. This image shows what is happening in Unit 731, which was a bacteriological research base designed to prevent epidemics and purify water. But as you may know, the reality of the activities in this unit are quite different. The doctors and soldiers who worked there carried out the most inhuman experiments on prisoners. Unspeakable, monstrous practices were carried out on human guinea pigs simply for the sake of it. Fortunately, this unit did not have a long existence. Under the threat of a Soviet invasion, those in charge fled, destroying part of the buildings. The matter came to light, and in 2002, the existence of this unit was officially confirmed. The procession of the Nazarene. The image that you see here makes you shudder. It might look like an old demonic ritual, but in reality, it is the opposite. This is a Christian ceremony in Spain, the Holy Week, an important celebration that takes place in Seville. The menacing individuals, hooded and dressed in black, are Nazarenos, or penitents. They are part of the group that participates in the procession, and depending on the brotherhood to which they belong, they dress in white or black, or other colors. Medical students and dissection. Here's a kind of picture that you are unlikely to see even today. It's of medical students smoking cigars, playing cards around a table with a human skeleton in front of them, with a cigarette in between. You tell yourself that this is some kind of provocative fantasy, decided by a bunch of facetious students. But no, what you see was a common fashion phenomenon in the United States. For medical students to pose cheerfully in front of a corpse was highly regarded and indicated a sign of superior temperament, of strength of character. Indeed, it was generally considered in medical schools at that time that the emotional aspects of human dissection were important in professional training. Strengthening one's temperament, eliminating unpleasant impressions at the sight of corpses for good were guarantees of correct professional conduct. This is what gave rise to the arrogant fashion that may be shocking nowadays. The Cooper family. Today we can quickly know if a photo has been faked or not, and it is very easy to not believe in trickery, since there is a plethora of means of faking. But in the early days of photography, it was impossible to explain a paranormal phenomenon and link it to a simple trick. Of all the photos that shook the 1950s, there is this famous portrait of the Cooper family. This strange picture surfaced in 2009 on the internet and created a great controversy. For those who don't know the context in which the photo was taken, here it is. On that day, the Cooper family got together and the father took a picture of the mother, grandmother, and 2 children to commemorate their move into their new home. So far, nothing to worry about. But when the photo was developed, the family was shocked to find that a mystery guest had been inserted into their portrait. The most incredible part was that he appeared to be hanging by his feet from the ceiling, with both arms hanging down as well, as if his whole body was swinging. The man's face is not visible, as it appears to have been blurred. Many people immediately thought of a ghost, which would have come to haunt the family. Others think that this image would have been retouched recently and that the original does not look like this one. However, if some elements give the impression of a paranormal presence, other elements leave room for doubt as to the veracity of the case. Indeed, a most glaring anomaly concerning the framing of the photo shows that instead of being centered on the 2 women, the shape is shifted to the left, as if the photographer wanted to take the apparition in addition to his family. One hypothesis would suggest that the authentic photo was cropped and the ghost added later. Either way, no one has really found an answer to this mystery. What do you think? Babushka lady. Look at this lady. At first sight, she is not really disturbing. But the story that revolves around her is really very disturbing. Lady Babushka is the nickname given to an unknown woman who was at the place where the assassination of John F. Kennedy took place on November the 22nd, 1963. You will tell me that she was not the only one on the scene that day, But wait until you know the rest. On the day of the president's assassination, the woman with the scarf crudely wrapped around her head in the Russian fashion was filming the murder scene in Daley Plaza in Dallas when the President of the United States was shot. At the time of the shooting, other people also filmed the scene, which allowed him to be identified in turn. And the most frightening thing is that the witnesses claimed that during the riots caused by the shooting, Lady Babushka was the only one who remained standing filming while everyone else was lying on the ground in terror. This mysterious woman could never be identified because it is impossible to distinguish her face on the recordings made. As for this woman, she never tried to testify about this drama, which by the way is not insignificant, which leaves doubt about her involvement. Nevertheless, in 1970, a woman named Beverly Oliver claimed to be Lady Babushka, claiming that FBI agents had come to her house to retrieve the video of the film, took it from her, and then never came back, nor gave any news. In 1988, the same woman repeated her words in a documentary dedicated to Kennedy's disappearance. But according to Vincent Bugliosi, a former US prosecutor, there is no proof that this woman was telling the truth, nor is there any evidence that she was actually present at the time. In 1994, a researcher named Gary Mack revealed that a Kodak employee had told him that 30 years earlier, a woman had come to the lab to develop a photo related to the assassination attempt of JFK. However, he said that the photo was very blurry and that there was no way to study it. The man also claimed that Beverly Oliver was 17 years old at that time and that she could be Lady Babushka. But on the other hand, Gary Mack also thinks that the story of this mysterious lady could well have been fabricated and that it is only the fruit of some people's imagination. An Elvis Presley concert filmed with a phone. Look at this incredible photo. If you're a part of the current generation, it might not jump out at you. But if you're part of the older generation, you'll probably notice that something isn't quite right. A Reddit user spotted a woman holding a smartphone at Elvis's last concert in 1977 when smartphones had not yet been invented. Since this picture, the craziest theories have been added to those that already existed, including the fake death of the singer or his masked career. It was enough to panic the conspiracy of time travel. For a large part of these people, there is no doubt. It is indeed a smartphone, and as it did not exist in 1977, it would be logical to believe in an alleged traveler from the future to attend this concert. Yes, I know. You really have to be crazy to believe in such a thing. Nevertheless, it is important to underline that in 1970, Kodak had to put on the market a camera which had the same format as the current smartphones. Now, everyone is free to believe in what they want. I'm leaning towards the most rational explanation. The faces of the SS Watertown. One of the most famous paranormal cases of the century is undoubtedly that of the faces of the SS Watertown. What? You've never heard of it? The story takes place in December 1924 in the Pacific when two sailors from the crew of the SS Watertown are working in a warehouse. James Courtney and Michael Meehan were in the middle of their shift and had to clean an area inside the cargo when a horrible tragedy caught them unawares. While they were working, noxious gases began leaking into the cargo. Of course, the two men were unaware of this. They were quickly overcome by the gases and eventually collapsed. The two sailors were given a funeral on board the ship and their bodies were thrown into the sea. Everyone had witnessed this, but strangely, the next day, a witness claims to have seen the faces of Courtney and Meehan in the waves off the port side of the ship. They remained in the water for about 10 seconds before disappearing. Other crew members also report witnessing this extraordinary phenomenon and seeing their faces in the ocean foam in the days that followed. When the ship arrived in New Orleans, Captain Keith Tracy reported these very mysterious sightings to his employers. To be sure, it was suggested that they photographed the faces as soon as they appeared on the surface of the water. Here's the picture. Judge for yourself. To answer the question you are currently asking yourself in your head, this photo was analyzed by experts and it turned out that it was never faked. So, do you now believe in ghosts? The Revenant. During the First World War, there lived a certain Freddie Jackson, a soldier of the British Royal Air Force who served as a mechanic. maintaining the fighter planes on board the HMS Daedalus. Unfortunately, the man died in 1919. He did not die in combat, but he had the misfortune to step on a moving aircraft propeller. He was buried, and that should have been the end of his story on this earth. But it wasn't, for the man resurfaced in a very strange way, in a photograph on the very day he was buried. On that day, his fellow squadron members gathered for a group photo, and it was only afterwards, when the photo was presented to the squadron, that it was noticed that Freddy's face had crept into the photo as well. Granted, one might think it was a mix-up or that it was a friend who looked like him, but everyone agreed that it was Freddie Jackson. The photo was clear and sharp. The man appears to be looking behind one of his comrades. Needless to say, in 1919, computers did not exist, and neither did photo editing software. And even if one tried to fake the photos of the time, the trickery was badly practiced considering the fact that photography was still in its infancy. So, any explanation? The head in the stars. Some time ago, a photo circulated on the internet showing a little girl photographed by her father in 1964. Father Jim Templeton thought he was taking an ordinary photo, but he only realized something intriguing after developing it. He noticed that behind his sweet little girl, a strange shape appeared, closely resembling a spaceman, standing behind her. You will say to me, "Too easy, it is a photo trick." Yes, but I would answer you that this photo dates from a time when digital trickery was much more difficult to perform than today. Moreover, experts say that the image has not been falsified. So, what do you think this astronaut is doing suspended in the sky? The master of cinema and time travel? Well, we agree, Charlie Chaplin was a great pioneer of cinema, if not the greatest precursor of the seventh art. But did he also have the gift of going back in time? The images of a bonus DVD of the film Circus from 1928 have created a great doubt on the question. On it, a woman can be seen wearing a black object to her ear while chatting, which would naturally lead one to believe that it is a cell phone. Posted on YouTube, the scene has given way to many theories. Here are some of them. Some claim that it is again a time traveler who would have returned with her phone. Yes, who separates from his phone even 5 minutes nowadays? A journalist from the CNET website thinks the opposite, supporting the idea that in 1928, even if this traveler had come, she would not have been able to use her phone because it was impossible to get any telephone network in a world without cell phones. The New York Daily News offers a more credible version, that the woman was deaf and that she was using an acoustic horn. Well, that's a good point. Another theory suggests that the mysterious woman simply had a toothache and was holding an ice pack to her cheek to ease the pain. As for the Washington Post, it simply talks about a genius marketing stunt for the 25th anniversary of the cult movie Back to the Future. According to the newspaper, it would be Marty McFly who got a little fat and who called Doc to ask him to help him go back in time. Especially since the video was posted by chance the same week as the DVD and Blu-ray re-release of Back to the Future. Yes, everything seems more logical all of a sudden. So, deafness, toothache, Back to the Future, or just a high-level marketing trick? The Rebel Stranger. You must surely know this legendary image. It is the one of Tank Man, the man who in 1989 became the symbol of the resistance to the Beijing dictatorship. On June the 5th of that year, a man dressed in a white shirt walked down Shangyang Avenue, which overlooks Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and in front of him, a myriad of tanks were slowly advancing towards their target. But the column of tanks was stopped by this man who stood in front of them and prevented them from passing. The lead tank tried several times to dodge him to pass, changing position and path each time. The man responded in turn by trying to obstruct the tank's attempt to pass. The duel lasted for quite some time. The images were so spectacular and exceptional that they were filmed and shared all over the world. Today, this man is world famous, and these images are the most emblematic of all time, although his identity has never been officially recognized.